See, that's asking a lot. All right, well, let's just get started in the interest of time. I'm Charlotte Kendrick. I'm a graduate and coordinator and instructor on the Norman campus at the School of Social Work. And today with us to talk about licensure, we have Mr. Jim Marks, who's the executive director of the Oklahoma State Board of Licensed Social Workers. And also Sean Murray. Good to see you again, Sean. And I think I don't know how recent, but has taken the LMSW fairly recently. There was another student that I don't see that he has come, and that's all right.
Here, he was having some trouble with the links, but here's Anthony.
Okay, there's Anthony. We'll try not to call you Samantha. And so we'll move from there. So I think what we'll do is do about, I want to thank you for coming. We do have CEUs for this. In about the last 3 to 5 minutes, I'll put the link for the survey in the chat. You also need to put your name in the chat if you are wanting CEUs. That will tell us who attended. And without further ado, I think we'll do about 15 minutes or so with Mr. Marks, and then we'll let Sean and Anthony share 15 minutes to give, like a personal experience of what was this process like. So without further ado, Mr. Marks.
Well, that's a lot of pressure if you've got people that are going to share their experience with our office specifically. So hopefully it wasn't too bad of an experience. So Charlotte and I go back quite a ways, and I'm thankful for the invitation to come in and just visit with you all briefly today. Some of you I may have already spoken to because I've just about knocked out all of the presentations that I do for the grad students in terms of the licensure process. If you haven't heard it, we can certainly, I can certainly take any questions that you might have. So this would be applicable to both undergrad and graduate, actually. So as Charlotte mentioned, my name is Jim Marks. I'm the executive director at the State Board of Social Work. And we're the regulatory agency specific to our profession. So if you talk to anybody that's a social worker, you're going to find out pretty quickly that we're a pretty passionate bunch about our profession. We're pretty protective about it. We want people practicing ethically. We want people practicing responsibly. And licensure is the mechanism through which that's actually assured. So I think most people, and I bring this up because I think just the general public, if you were to have a discussion with somebody who you mentioned social work to them, or even go to the legislature and mention the term social worker to them, their thinking immediately is aligned with the Department of Human Services, and in particular, Child Welfare Services. And that's not who we are. I mean, it could be. I mean, if they have a degree in social work, like you all are getting ready to have, congratulations to all of you, by the way, and you have a license, then yeah, and you work for DHS, then yeah, you're actually legally qualified as a social worker. In the state of Oklahoma, and it's not just the state of Oklahoma, actually, it's every state. We have one of the coolest professions in terms of this idea of licensure mobility and portability, in that it's very transferable, meaning if you get licensed in Oklahoma and you decide that you need to relocate to another jurisdiction, as long as your license is current, it's good standing here, you're going to be able to do that without, any difficulty, if you will. You're going to have to go through their application process and do a background check, that kind of stuff. But you're going to be able to move that license. You're not going to have to sit for the exam again, so on and so forth. Once you get licensed, you're going to be licensed indefinitely as long as you maintain the currency of it and as long as it maintains good status. Other professions don't have that. Psychology doesn't have that. The LPCs don't have that. LMFTs don't have that. So you guys really picked a very solid, if your end game is to get clinically licensed, or if it's to even work at the macro level or the meso, whatever, you've definitely chosen the right path academically anyway, because regardless of what licensure you pursue, it is transferable to every state, every U.S. territory, and really even the Canadian provinces, because we all fall under the same testing umbrella. We're all testing through the Association of Social Work Boards. So just really quick, I mentioned, you heard me say that we're the regulatory agency for our profession. So basically what that means is that we manage the oversight of that. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Charlotte's a licensed clinical social worker. So we're the body that, if you were to just strip it down to our core function, we regulate our practice in the sense of the complaints process, and there's a million other things that we do, but that we're all about public protection. 99% of the time, our practitioners are going to be practicing responsibly, ethically, legally, so on and so forth. It's in those certain set of circumstances when they're not, and they become identified to us, that we actually get involved. And that could be anything from asking for reviews to a full-blown investigation with law enforcement. And then, the outcomes are certainly going to vary from situation to situation. So that's the big picture in terms of what it is that we do, what it is that we do. Relative to you guys, again, congratulations. I don't know what everybody's end game is, but even if you're undergrad or you're getting ready to get your MSW, graduate with that, both would be applicable. I mean, as far as the licensure process, if your end game is to get an advanced level licensure, like the clinical license or the advanced generalist or the admin license, you're going to have to start with this license first, the LMSW or the LSWA. You can't even move forward in pursuing those other ones without getting the LMSW. You're eligible to apply for that right out of grad school or right out of undergrad school. The LSWA is our bachelor's level license. And we allow people to start the application process with us even prior to your graduating. So basically what that means is, for those of you that are going to be May graduates or even August graduates, we post our board meets like 6 times a year, every odd numbered month. And we post those dates to the website. All application materials are due 3 weeks in advance. So for you guys, the LMSW, I'm going to focus specifically on the grads. The requirement for that is that you have an MSW from an academic institution accredited through CSWE, which you will have, obviously, graduating from the University of Oklahoma. That simply means that that degree is no different than any other academic institution accredited through CSWE, be it Michigan, Southern Cal, University of Kansas, Texas, wherever. It's basic. What that basically means is that the core requirements relative to the academia itself are comparable from this academic institution to another. So for us, the requirements to submit the application for an LMSW license is that you have an MSW, but I just said you could actually start that process earlier. So really what we would be looking for, if you're interested in pursuing that, like if you know that your end game is to get one of those advanced level licensures, we want you to start the process now because we want to get you licensed as immediately as we can, meaning upon receipt of your transcript. So what we are asking all of our grad students and even our undergrad students, if it's for the bachelor's level license, is to get us that application fee, affidavit of legal status, do a background check with us. Even without the transcript, we'll accept it. So really the only 3 things that I would need to get from individuals that are interested in pursuing licensure is that 7-page application, the fee, and the affidavit. The background check is going to be, you'll schedule that, and there's a link for that that's actually managed. We manage those electronically. You'll schedule your background check to go to the site that's in closest proximity to where you live. And once you've completed that process, those results will come directly to me. I'm the only one that gets to see those results. But I will tell you, I mean, we don't have the time to go into the application just on a full-blown sense, but there's 2 pages worth of yes or no questions. And some of those questions pertain to information regarding possible findings in somebody's background. What I always tell people about that is don't sweat it, but don't lie either. Be very transparent on that application, because if something wonky shows up on your background check that was not disclosed, that application's not going before the board. That's probably me. And I'm super nice. I will pick up the phone and give you a call, and we'll probably have a discussion about the disparity between what I'm seeing in the background check and what we've actually disclosed on the application. I'm not reaching out to anybody to be punitive or to punish anybody or anything like that. But if there are findings, like the 2 questions on there, like, have you ever been popped for a DUI or something like that? Do you have a felony conviction or something like that? If you have anything that's going to show up on your background check, just be honest about it, because what you're going to do is write out a statement, explain that as part, and you'll include that as part of your application. Those are going to, when Jenna gets those, they come directly to me. I mean, on any yes questions, those apps, and I vet them out immediately. And if there's something on there that I think warrants a personal appearance, I'm probably just going to pick up the phone and give you a call and we'll have a discussion about it. And we're going to put you in the best possible position that we can to make sure that your application is going to get approved. I haven't seen anything yet that's been a deal breaker. And we've got some folks that have made applications that have been incarcerated for drug trafficking and just all kinds of stuff. Our board of directors, they're all social workers. I mean, they get it that people make mistakes. They're not worried about you getting popped for a couple of DUIs 10 years ago. They're far more interested in knowing who Jim Marks is as a person today versus who I was, 10, 15, 20 years ago when this event actually occurred. And my belief is, and I believe this to the core of my soul, if they didn't believe in an ability's power of change, then they probably shouldn't be social workers to begin with, right? I mean, that's why we go into this profession. We kind of hold that as one of our core beliefs. And our board, they're fantastic. I mean, like I said, they get it. People do make mistakes. So I always tell people, don't freak out about the background check if there's going to be something that shows up. I will tell you that it's both a federal and a state. And so what we're actually checking is the violent crimes registry and the sex crimes registry. So like, if you've been popped recently for trafficking children for prostitution purposes, that might be a bit of a deal breaker. Okay. We might have to have a talk about it. But I mean, if we're talking about nonviolent offenses and those like I said, so far, I haven't seen anything that we have not been able to work with in terms of approvals. As far as the application itself, I just lost my train of thought. I was actually going to tell you guys. Background check, application fee, affidavit of legal status. Due dates for the applications, always 3 weeks in advance. So again, you can go to the website, pull up the meeting dates. We post them a year in advance, and it will actually give you the deadline due date, if you will. On the applications itself, we have to have recent pictures. It is going to have to be notarized. I will also say that we're in the process of completely revamping our website. Probably in another 4 to 6 months, all of this, what you guys are getting ready to do is going to go away. And the application process is actually going to be fully electronic and fully automated. Well, you'll just be uploading and attesting to stuff electronically. It's been a long, long work in progress. The test, I know I'm speaking really quick. The test, which I think some other folks are probably going to talk about their experience with, there is a test required. So your application fees, I mean, people are always worried about how much this is going to cost me to make application. So the initial part of it is there's a $150 application fee, and that is paid directly to Jim Marks. I'm just kidding. It's actually paid to the Board of Social Work. So you'll make that payable to the Board of Social Work, and that can be a check, money order. We have a credit card authorization form that you can print off and just mail that in with your application. And right now we do not accept anything electronically. You're going to have to mail everything in. So, and then your background check, I think is going to be about like $55. So for your application and your background check, you're looking at a couple $100. Okay. So that's to get started. Once the board approves your application, we'll enter you into the candidate registry here at our office. And then when the board approves it and I've got your transcript, we're going to send you an approval letter. At the point that we receive your transcript, you're actually officially licensed at that point. And it's going to say that in your approval letter. It's provisional. So you're not going to actually have a wallet card or a wall certificate, but it is going to say it in there that you've been approved for the LMSW provisional license. And that means that you're licensed no differently than anybody else that has an LMSW license. You are licensed and you are subject to those rules and regulations that are identified in Title 59 and our agency rules. And the only difference between you and that person that's fully licensed without the restrictions, you just simply haven't taken the test yet. So you're going to have up to 1 year from the date that we receive your transcript. And it's going to tell you in this approval letter what that date is. So anything that we send you, I always just read it really carefully. Because once you get approved, I'm going to send you this approval letter and it's going to lay everything out for you. It's going to tell you who you need to contact to schedule your exam. You can go online and schedule it. You can call them and schedule it. There is an exam fee and it is per exam attempt. So what that means is within that year, you could potentially test up to 4 times. So I always encourage people, if it's not fiscally restrictive, schedule that test immediately. Okay. The cost of it is about $230. It's pretty steep. That money does not come to us. That goes directly to ASWB. So let's say that the worst case scenario is that you schedule that test, you don't pass it right off the bat. you're still provisionally licensed according to the approval that was made at the board and according to that approval letter. So you've got a full year. You can take it multiple times, but it is going to cost you $230 each time you take it. I always encourage people, if it's, again, they've got online practice testing that you can purchase for like $40. Tons of materials out there that are available for purchase for you to review and prep yourself for. I will say this, for the LMSW exam, 90% of it you already know. 90% of it's coming from your text, your classroom instruction. There's no clinical content or anything like that on that specific exam. So if you paid even a little bit of attention in class, you're going to be okay. I just got the pass rates from ASWB for last calendar year. Oklahoma hovers right, we're right on point with the North American pass rate. So like the way ASWB breaks it down for us is the North American pass rate. So that's the US and Canada. Everybody that's taken the LMSW test for first-time exam takers, there's about a 75% success pass rate for first-time exam takers. Oklahoma's, like anybody that's made application through our office, we are right in alignment with that. And same for the clinical. What I always tell people about the test itself, don't overthink the questions. It's about 170 questions. It's case vignette driven. It is a very well done, and it's a very reliable exam. It's validated to the nth degree. And what I will tell you is a lot of people go into those things and they just start over. The folks that have struggle with it, it's because they're overthinking it. Don't do that. You have to remember that what they're testing for are what we call minimal competencies. And so they're not these highly complex case vignettes that they're actually presenting on the test itself. Read that vignette, take it exactly as it is. You've got 4 possibilities, eliminate 2 of them, and just do a little critical thinking to get down to that quote unquote best possible choice. And I promise you, you're going to do well on it. Most of our folks, like I said, we're right in alignment with the North American pass rate. So I think I've gone 17 minutes, Charlotte, so I'm going to stop right here.
Okay. Hey, you know what, Jim? Right before we go, there's 2 people had this question. I think it's a good question. If you'll answer this just real quick, it's a simple one before we go to Sean and Anthony.
Yeah, I'll stay
on. A couple of people ask, you must get the LMSW before you can apply to get the LCSW. Is that correct?
Yes, you have to be licensed provisionally, approved for the provisional element before we can even consider you for any advanced level licensure. And it'll tell you that in that approval letter that I'm going to send you after we approve your LMSW provisional. It's going to have all that information in there about testing, but there's also going to be information in there that says if you are currently working in a role within an agency setting doing clinical work and you want to start supervision for clinical licensure, you can do that before you don't have to have passed the exam. You can literally start that process then. Let's say the worst case scenario is you don't pass the test during that approval year. We're still going to qualify all of those hours that you've accumulated during that year, and they're going to stay with you indefinitely. Now, you'll have to stop at that point. You can resubmit another application to request another year to test, but we won't put you back under supervision until you're actually licensed. So the short answer is yes, you can start supervision immediately.
All right. That was an excellent overview. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean and Anthony. Between the 2 of you, maybe each of you take about 6 or 7 minutes. So we have a few minutes for more questions. I'll let you fight over who goes first. I think most people are interested in what was your experience and how you went about this process.
Anthony, I have no preference. Do you? I'll go ahead and jump in since I'm unmuted. Hi, I'm Sean Murray. Hello, everyone who knows me from my time at OU. Graduated in the summer of 2020 from the MSW program, and I took my licensure in February. I'm currently working as a team lead for case managers with the Homeless Alliance and their kind of a work program, Curbside Chronicle. With the licensure process, so after I graduated, I kind of gave myself a month to procrastinate, sending all of my stuff into Jim Marks, and the month became 2 months pretty quickly. And finally, I just kind of decided to do it. If you live in Oklahoma City, it's really easy. It's right there in the corner of 36th and Classen on that southeast corner. I was had a mailer ready to send it out, and I'd done everything but put a stamp on it. And I was just like, I'm just gonna go there. And I drove there, walked in, it's bottom floor to your right, really easy to find. Right now, because of COVID, the door isn't generally open, but you can just slip your stuff underneath that. And to touch on what Jim had been talking about earlier, I probably over disclosed some things on the affidavits for disclosure when you're going through your background check. And Jim called me within 15 minutes and said, hey, your background check is clean. You don't need to disclose this. And so we amended that very quickly. And I had my provisional within the month at that point. And as far as an affidavit, I found, I went on to the Metro library system, found a generic affidavit. I tweaked it to fit my situation. We have notaries at work who provided the notarization for that. It's pretty easy to find those kind of blank affidavit forms and to build that to fit your situation. Or you can just type something up. I just wanted to work off of a template. I signed up for the test in February of this year, and that's when I took it. I had planned to start really kind of doing my daily studying plan November, December. And then in December, my grandmother ended up being in the hospital and had like some memory related issues that really flared up from that. P.S. If you have an older client who suddenly seems to have dementia, try to get them a urine analysis from their primary care, because often there's some sort of infection going on. But just good information for all of you working with folks in the future. But because of that event, I didn't really get the period of time I wanted to study. And my boss, Megan Mueller, who also has a lot of students that are practicum students, she's a great resource for the community. And especially OU and new students. She was my practicum advisor whenever I was going through my practicum. But she told me, don't reschedule it, just do it. Don't tell people when you're taking it, just quietly go, be as prepared as you can be. You will be fine. I know you're fine because I know you and I know your performance. And the test was, it wasn't easy. It was a slog. It's, you have, I think, about 4 hours to take the test. I finished the test in 3. I did have one psychopharm question, I'll say. So just kind of know roughly what prescriptions are typically used for X mental health diagnosis. I Googled that the morning just to refresh before I walked in, and I was pretty clear on that whenever I came across that question. A lot of it, like Jim said, is situational vignettes. So you're looking, and I actually struggle with these, but you're looking for like the best course of action. So like there might be like 3, usually it's just 2 correct answers, but there might be 3 correct answers, but you're looking for the best one, or what's the first thing that you want to do in this situation. Know a lot about your duty to report stuff. I encountered that quite a bit. Know a lot about your notes and like as far as court orders and like all of that, and like your kind of legal responsibility to the client and when a court can request that information. And that was a lot of it. A lot of it you'll encounter day in, day out at your practicum sites. A lot of it you've learned. I felt I tend to be an anxious person, but I test well. So I walk into tests feeling like the doom spiral. And then I come out having done pretty well. And that was the case in this situation. I drank too much coffee before, so my hands were shaking a lot. I didn't drink enough water. You can absolutely go to the restroom. I finished the test in 3 hours, and I gave myself 45 minutes to review several questions. On the format on the test, you do have an option where you can kind of select questions that you want to come back to, which is nice when you're kind of like not sure about things and then kind of just go back through. I'm really glad that I went just committed to the date that I took it. And then I had my license within a week. Anything else you think I should touch on, Professor Kendrick?
Oh, we'll let Anthony fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
He's like, great.
Sorry.
So I graduated in 18. I got my LCSW just in January, actually. The LMSW, honestly, I'm a little fuzzy on. Been a few years. And I'm really fortunate that right after graduation, I got on with Family and Children's Services. And man, they have got the entire process detailed out. Like it doesn't even take thought on my part. I just had to find a supervisor. I know that's not very helpful for right now, but does anybody have any questions? It was 4,000 hours, 4,000 practice hours, 3,000 of those were clinical, and then 1,000 supervision hours. Wait, I think 1,000 supervision hours, James?
100.
100 supervision. Yeah, once a week, you got to meet with your supervisor.
Yeah, so there's a question in here, Jim. Can you take the LCSW before the completion of the supervision hours? I don't believe so. Yeah. Okay.
No. And actually, there are some states that actually allow folks to test for the clinical right out of graduate school while they're getting their LMS. But ASWB, they're putting a stop to all of that. They really have found that, and I don't know what the data has told them, but they have found that folks seem to be quite a bit more successful post their supervision experience on the clinical exam versus taking it right out of grad school. So they're basically going to streamline it and require all states to have their supervision completed before. And I will also say Sean's being very, very humble relative to his discussion about the exam. He actually killed it. So if you want to know, what he did to prepare for it, you might want to reach out to him.
Haley, there are study guides. There's one for the master's and the clinical. I forget who wrote them, but they were really good. I had both of them. All the questions are multiple choice. Yeah, multiple choice, John. Yes. Like Mark James was saying, you'll get 4 answers. 2 are obviously not right, and then the last 2 just a little critical thinking. Man, you'll get right there.
You that want some, I have some links to some good documents for you to study with. I put my email in the chat there, so just feel free to email me.
Yeah, I used 2 primary sources for studying. A coworker of mine had previously taken the exam and shared a PDF with me. So I had the 2018 study guide from ASWB, which I used somewhat. But what I really kind of worked on, and I think this is part of my anxiety, there's an app called Behavioral Health Study Prep, and they have stuff for the LMSW, they have stuff for nurses, they have stuff for the LCSW. You have daily quizzes that you can take. You can adjust those quizzes, so as you take it, it'll develop like quizzes for your weakest subject and stuff like that. The app kind of told me I was a big loser every day. I'm kidding, but the app made me nervous, but I was really glad that I went through that like kind of every day, especially in the 2 weeks leading up to it. Like my household was getting very frustrated with me because I was doing like 150, quizzes in the evening, which could take a while. And it's kind of just unavailable. But yeah, I really liked that study guide. Whenever I paid for it though, you just paid for it once, and now they're on a subscription service, which I don't like as much, because ideally you could just pay for it and be done and then use it. I would like to be able to study for the LCSW now, correct? Right? But now it's not as easy, or you just have to pay for this prescription service for it. But I am glad I did it. I'll type it into I'll put it in the chat.
And I really liked the books from Don Apgar for the master's and clinical test. I read each of these about 3 times before the test. And James, I think I did all right. You got my scores apparently.
Yes, sir. You did very well.
Mr. Falk, would you put that up where I could like write it down?
The name of the book in the chat?
Yes. Thank you.
Other questions? With a full caseload and teaching the required and reaching the required 4,000 hours in supervision, an LCS says it takes an average to 2 to 3 years to attain it.
That's about right. But like Family and Children's Services, I have a coworker who's doing a lot of affiliate hours over at Crisis Care, and she'll have it done 1.5, 2 hours, man. She is knocking her time down. So
But-
you pick up your overtime, you make sure all your hours count, your treatment plans. I mean, do it legit. But yeah, there are alternatives to get that whittled out a lot quicker.
Actually, you can't do it any quicker. The minimum of 24 months of supervision is required. And that's the standard
Oh.
nationally. So there is a minimum requirement. And Anthony's 100% right. It's not uncommon for people to hold both a full-time job and do a part-time work somewhere else. And he's right in that those hours will certainly increase, because if we've got more than one approved contract in place, they're obviously going to be accruing, 60 hours a week versus 40 hours a week. But the reality of it is it's not going to allow them to finish their supervision in a time period of less than 24 months. There has to be a minimum of 24 months of supervision in place. So the minimum time period is 2 years.
Thank you, James.
Sure.
And on the other hand, don't get discouraged, because sometimes life happens. And I kept working, but because of the cost of supervision, I had to slow that down a little bit. So, you do what you have to do, right?
Well, and that's actually a great point. That's far more common than the other side of it. I mean, we've got folks that, for whatever reason, they just want to take a break from the field. They go on maternity leave, whatever the case may be. So it's definitely not uncommon for a person to go well beyond that 24 months. Depending on what their life circle. And the thing is that once we are able to confirm your hours, be it at any of those evaluation periods, 1, 2, or 3, once we confirm those hours, they're going to stay with you indefinitely. They're not going to go away. So at any point, like if you pick up 2 years down the road, you're going to be picking up right where you left off, or at least based on what we were able to confirm that you've completed. And we're pretty picky about that. And the reason for that relates to that mobility portability issue. And that if you go to another state and want to get licensed there on the basis of your Oklahoma license, we've got to be able to validate that you did all of the stuff that we said you did. So they don't have any questions about that as well. So yeah.
Actually, James, on that note, and this is kind of like a hearsay thing I heard from another coworker at one point. And so we're all here and we have a captive audience now, but how well do supervision hours port to another state?
Okay, so that's a really good question. And that's the variance in that from state to state is pretty great. So the one thing that we have portability with is specific to licensure. That's going to move from state to state with no problem whatsoever. Like if I decide that I'm going to pack up and move to Michigan back to Detroit tomorrow and transfer my license, I just go through their application process, do a background check, it moves. As long as there's nothing goofy with my license here. Right. The supervision hours is a little bit different. That's a good example of this is going to be, let's say that you start supervision in Oklahoma, and we keep really good documentation here as far as logs and evaluations and so on and so forth. And you're going to move to Texas, like halfway through it. Texas won't accept it. I don't really know why they won't accept it, but they won't, even with the documentation that we have in place, they will not accept it. Now, I've got one person going through this process with them right now. And they've got a new director. So I'm hoping that they're a little more agreeable at this point, because we do. Like if that was reversed and somebody from Texas was moving to Oklahoma and they've done half of their supervision for clinical licensure down there, if they can get me the documentation that I'm asking for, that's comparable to what we would require here, that job description, so I could see that they were doing clinical work while they were under supervision, qualifications of their supervisor, how they were logging it or how they tracked it, any evaluation. I mean, if I can get stuff like that, we'll try to give them credit. I'll give them as much credit as we possibly can, but to say that other states are willing to do that, they're not. That's very individualized. So depending on the state that you're going to be moving to, you're probably just going to have to reach out to their board and have that discussion with them. And if you need us to go to bat for you, we absolutely will do that. 100%. I know I chair the, I meet with all the executive directors through the nation. I chair a group, like we all meet twice a year. So I chair that group. And so I know all of them pretty well, and I've got a pretty good feel in terms of what some will accept, but if anybody encounters any issues with that, pick up the phone and call me. I will call their director for you and say, hey, this is the documentation that we have. This is what we can provide to you. Now, ultimately, it's going to be their decision, but I'll go to bat for you.
Yeah.
For at least as long as I'm here.
We have a question here. Can you remain as an LMSW and not move forward with the LCSW?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have tons of folks that are doing that. The big difference, obviously, and we didn't get into what you can do and what you can't do. Like Anthony, you're licensed clinically at this point, right? So Anthony, there's nothing that he's not going to be able to do with his license. If he wants to hang out his own shingle, open up his private practice, structure payment agreements with payer systems, we as licensed clinical social workers are going to have that availability. LMSWs, you can do clinical work. In fact, we require it, especially if you're going to be pursuing the clinical license. But is it a requirement that you do that? No. But if you are going to be doing clinical work or, advanced level work, you're probably going to be doing it under the guise of an agency setting, meaning you're not going to be able to practice privately and or independently with that level of licensure. You're going to be an employee of an agency and fulfilling the job requirements that they've defined for the position that you actually hold. So we do have quite a few people that don't have any aspirations of going into private practice, whatever the case may be, and they just want to stay under that agency umbrella, and that's perfectly agreeable.
And James, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see it like LCSWs are much like if you look on like LinkedIn or something like that, you often see like they're asking for an LC. And I think in a medical setting, they want at least one LC on staff because you can sign off on the reports and billing from other LMs to Medicare, right? And
from a regulatory perspective, that's a good point. And FCS actually has this down to a science. It's with what Anthony mentioned earlier. I mean, and most of our agencies do. Grand Lake Mental Health, Creoaks, Family and Children. I mean, actually every agency, private, nonprofit, all of them that we work with, most of them are very, very familiar with our rules. But what Sean is actually alluding to is what the federal billing regs would actually require. So if we have an LMSW, what that means at the federal level is that those individuals are not going to be diagnosing or assessing independently of a qualified licensed practitioner, i.e. the LCSW, a clinical psychologist, somebody like that. Somebody within that agency setting is going to be reviewing those progress notes, treatment plans, so on and so forth, and they're going to be signing off on those so the agency can actually receive the compensation for those services. And that's not something that we actually get involved with from our side of thing. I probably know enough about it to make me dangerous. So, but yeah, you're exactly right in terms of what you're describing there.
Yeah. So real quick, we have a question here about the LSW admin.
Okay.
Just briefly, what is that?
That's the LSW admin and the LSW. You would actually be taking the same exam. ASWB tweaked their exams probably about 7-8 years ago, and they removed all the clinical from that one, what they call the advanced generalist exam. So that would be the exam that you're going to be taking with that. Obviously, that's going to be a macro form of practice. We don't have too many LSW admins anymore. I mean, I'd say probably out of our 3,000 licensees, we might have 25 LSW admins, to be honest with you. And some of those are actually dually licensed and have clinicals as well. I think you can practice independently with that license and the LSW license, but what you cannot practice is privately, meaning you cannot do clinical work in a private setting with the LSW admin or the LSW, which is the advanced generalist. So it's kind of contradictory, because when I say that you can practice independently, what that actually means is the example that I normally would give, like Deaconess or Heritage, like one of those agencies that has like an adoptive home program. An individual at this level of licensure could contract with those agencies to facilitate the completion of those. It's non-clinical. There's a prescribed reporting format, but it is non-clinical. That would be an independent form of practice. An individual with this license, they're mostly going to be focused on high-level macro work, legislative type work, policy making, those kinds of things. And it's there's no wrong answer in terms of what your personal interest is. I mean, just very simply stated, there's many ways to affect change. You can do it at the macro level by, instituting policies that are going to affect the masses, or you can do it from the ground up, like the individual level with the clinical. You're going to work with the individual and let that basically pay itself forward. I mean, very simplistically stating it. So,
yeah.
Like I said, if you have some interest in doing the LSW admin or the LSW, actually, we've got a pilot program going on with DHS right now, where they're actually licensing people at the advanced generalist. So the LSW, their child welfare folks, they got some kind of a grant. So I was working with their legal unit to kind of set this up for them in terms of how they were going to work out their contracts and what they needed to look like, so on and so forth. So they're actually going to be licensing their supervisors, some of their program field reps, and they're actually paying for it. So we are seeing an increase in some of that, but again, the scope of work that you're able to perform with that is certainly going to vary, if you will, from the clinical for sure.
2 more quick questions, and then we're going to be at our time. Does supervision for the LCSW have to start within a certain time frame, or can you start it whenever?
You start it whenever, as long as you've got an LMSW, and that's going to be the key. So let's say that you graduate and you're going to have a license. That's a given. So if you pursue the LMSW license right out of grad school or even a year down the road, it's not going to matter. I mean, or 5 years down the road or whenever, but you are going to have to be licensed before we can move forward to start you with the clinical supervision. But there's no cap or anything like that. You don't have to start within 5 years or anything like that.
And then the last one here, there's cost. Is there cost for supervision, or is some of it free? And I think that depends.
I was going to bring this up when you mentioned having to stop for the cost, Professor. So my agency, it was free. The agency paid for supervision. They paid my licensure supervisor for me. It's not free. It is a service it's a billed service, man. Yeah. You're going to have to pay out of pocket or find an agency that covers it.
Right.
So yeah, Anthony was fortunate enough to go to work at an agency that had folks on staff that were approved supervisors. So they were able to provide that internally for him without any out-of-pocket cost to him. Grand Lake Mental Health, the VA system, like some of those bigger agencies, CREOs, they'll generally have people on staff to facilitate the completion of that. If you go to work at a smaller agency and they don't have anybody on staff, you are going to have to find a board-approved supervisor, and we maintain a list of those on our website. I can help you find them if you need to find them. The cost is going to vary. I mean, truly, and we don't manage that. We don't regulate that. We don't get involved with that. That's strictly going to be between you, the supervisee, and that person who's going to be supervising you. We did do a little exercise at one of our trainings, and none of the supervisors wanted to say how much they were charging, understandably so. So we had them write down what they charged an hour on a sticky note, and we just put them up on the flip chart. And it was anywhere from 25 or really 0 all the way up to 150 an hour and everything in between. I would say the general rate, if you're going to have to go that route, is probably somewhere between 50 and 75 an hour, if I were guessing. But again, that's going to be between, and it's important that you guys find somebody that you have a good fit with. I mean, it's as important for them to be a good fit for you as it is for you to be a good fit for them. You really want to align yourself with somebody who is going to really work with you for skill development and really kind of prepare you for that, walking into the Pearson View Center and sitting down and getting ready to take that test for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are like a minute or so shy of our time. And really quick, do you interview for supervision? I guess you might do an interview. You might interview your supervisor and make sure it was a good fit for you.
Ask them how many people they've supervised.
Absolutely.
Rates, what their area of expertise is. Sorry, I just put ice in my mouth.
But it's not a formal interview, John, in that. So those of you that have emailed, I will, or told me in the chat, I will get you the information that I have that I give out when I do some really kind of a 3-hour LMSW, get ready to take the exam. Right after graduation, I'll do a couple of those. We'll get that information out to you all. And they'll be via Zoom, so people from far away can come as well. Thank you much, and you all have a wonderful afternoon. Jim, thank you so much for coming. Sean,
good luck to y'all.
Anthony, thank you very much for participating. It's helpful.
Thanks, Prof. Thanks, James. Good seeing you, Sean.
All right.
Yep.
Bye-bye.